given that, a lot of people say that Russia, as you said, Larry, that, Iran is weak and Russia will never come to the aid of Iran. But we just saw Russia and North Korea, DPRK, just announce that they worked very closely. They were working hand in hand as brothers, as they're saying, to liberate Kursk. I think sometimes people think of this too literally, that Russia is going to go full force militarily in for Iran if there's a war. What do you make of that Kursk situation where reports, Russia was not commenting on it all the way up until victory? And then they confirm what the Western media was so hysterically going mad about.
Western media was portraying that, oh my God, the Russian military is so weak, they're having to have 10,000 North Koreans come to save them. That was the Western media narrative. That was a lie. What this was Kim wanted to get one of his boys to get their feet wet, and asked Putin if he could send 800 troops to fight in Kursk, and they were embedded along with under Russian leadership. And the Russians, they were, on the one hand, they said, "Yeah, boy, these were some really very courageous fighters, man. They were fearless." But then the Russians were also saying at the same time, they were a little bit reckless too. So, they got some good experience, but it was not a critical element that Russia needed. But Russia had signed a defense pact with Korea, and so with North Korea. So North Korea was saying, "Hey, we don't want to just be the takers. We're going to be the givers. Here, let us." They get something out of this by getting these guys, instead of doing a military exercise, they get thrown into the real deal. And this is
it's not like that. It's not like that's the first time the Russians have ever worked with the North Koreans.
Yeah, exactly. So
No, I wanted to
it was entirely the intelligence community, the Western intelligence, tried to paint this as another indicator of Russian weakness, and that kind of malevolent analysis is dangerous for us, because it fails to allow us to appreciate what's actually happening on the ground there.
I think it was a direct reaction of our stiff arming in South Koreans, because they didn't want to do it, to ship, I think it was 500,000 artillery rounds to Ukraine. Mm-hmm. That Putin decided to get a lot closer to North Korea. I mean, we caused that, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I wanted to ask the implications for these emerging. I know Russia doesn't want to say it. I know Iran doesn't want to say it. I know a lot of the countries emerging in the multipolar world don't want to say military alliances. But given that there is this threat of war with Iran, as you have talked about, maybe we can turn to you, Colonel Wilkerson. What does Korea, DPRK, North Korea, and Russia's working together in Kursk, does it send a message that a similar kind of cooperation could be in the cards if there was to be a war against Iran, given how deeply these two countries now are getting closer together?
I think Larry's right. If I read, and I haven't read the English translation of the Farsi Russian, but I've read enough reports on it to where I think I understand the fundamental nature of the security agreement between Tehran and Moscow. And it is, if they are blatantly attacked, not in all circumstances, but if they are blatantly attacked, which I think Russia would interpret the U.S. bombing campaign against Iran to be a blatant attack, then Russia will come to their aid. And I don't doubt it for a moment that they would. Now, what that aid would constitute, I don't know. But I know there's a new equipment training team on the ground right now in Iran. It's been there for about 6 weeks now. And it's training them in the latest fighter aircraft that Russia has given them. It's probably going to put a squadron up in the air here very shortly. And I understand there are a couple more squadrons coming behind that. So, and we already know about S-400s and things like that are probably integrated into the Iranian air defense system now. So I don't doubt for a moment that Larry's right, that they would probably come to some sort of assistance if it were a blatant attack, which an attack by this would certainly be.
Yeah, when you look at that agreement, there are 47 articles, and I think it's Article 5, ironically, of that agreement, which the Russians basically, it's not a, if somebody attacks you, we're going to attack them. It's not that kind of language, but it's language saying that that basically, if Iran is attacked and it's a violation of Article 51 of the UN Charter, then Russia will basically be there to defend and support Iran. That entire agreement talks about intelligence cooperation, talks about further defense cooperation in both manufacturing of weapons as well as military exercises, talks about intelligence sharing, it talks about diplomatic interactions, it talks about building up the nuclear industry in Iran. And it's only in the very last part that you finally understand the reason for this. It is to create bring to fruition the north-south corridor. So from Russia's standpoint, creating this corridor, which will run from the Arabian Sea in the south, all the way north through Tehran, up through Azerbaijan, the Caspian Sea, into Russia, going all the way to St. Petersburg. So what they're doing is it's going to be a combination of maritime and railroad transportation to and from the seaports that are in St. Petersburg and then the Bandar Abbas down in southern Iran. And so this is where Russia is looking at this strategically, not just right now, but down the road, because apart from its access to the Pacific Ocean, if Russia wants to get into the Mediterranean or into the North Atlantic, it has to right now go through choke points that can be pretty easily shut down or create a real challenge strategically for Russia. And so creating this lane where they'll have another economic supply route firmly in place with Iran is why I think they made this decision back in 2018 to start this route. Because if you recall, it was in 2015 that Russia and China joined up with the West to sanction Iran. Then about 2-3 years later, and I think this was partly a result as Russia watched these continuing NATO exercises that were growing in intensity, and they knew that they were the enemy and they were the target of these exercises. They then started the plans for the first joint China, Russia, Iran naval military exercise, which took place in March of 2019. Now, that thing is Colonel Wilkerson knows the planning process for those kinds of exercises start 12 months, 18 months out. So there was something that happened in mid-2017 that led Russia to say, we need to work on solidifying our relationship with Iran. And I would argue that one of the reasons Iran did not retaliate militarily after the October 27 attack by Israel was not because they were afraid, not because they were weakened. They were in the final negotiations with Russia on this comprehensive security agreement. And Russia recognized the last thing they wanted was to tip off a major war in the region. They want to secure that line of communication. And I think the Russian and Chinese are thinking about this strategically. And the West, we're looking at belly button fuzz.
That is the MSR from World War II. Murmansk was only slightly in tonnage and throughput more of a logistics hub for the Soviet Union during World War II as this route. And we started working on this route with the British well before the war started for us, because we knew that we were going to get into that war, and we knew we were going to have to supply the Soviet Union. We knew Hitler was going to attack the Soviet Union eventually. Churchill knew it. Roosevelt knew it. So we started working on that route. We put about 800,000 wheeled vehicles up that route during the course of the war. And many people, many historians will tell you that Stalingrad could never have stood unless that supply route had been there. Well, they're just reviving it. They have some experience with it. And you also have to look at the Chinese railroads that are making their way towards Iran, making their way towards the center part of Central Asia, and even making their way. I understand the 16-hour one was going to debouch in Ukraine, and the war there has caused that to stop construction on that railroad. But all of this is going on because the East is becoming the power center of the world, not only the population center of the world, with 4 out of 5 of every human beings on the planet. We have 1 out of 5, if you will, in our hemisphere. And you can throw lots of things into that if you want to, but it's still about 4 to 1 in terms of population. And that's an old route that is going to save them a lot of time at sea, a lot of money, consequently, because sea passage is more expensive than land passage. And it's a game changer. This is what a lot of the great game was about towards the end of many of the old Eastern empires and the beginning of the Russian, the French, the Spanish, and the British. And the British and the Russians actually contested this for a long time. The Russians wanted to do, as Larry said, they want to get down there to the end of the Persian Gulf, but the British had a block there, and the Russians couldn't get down there. So this has been a contest for a long time, and now they're winning it.
You know, many people believe that it's Israel that is dragging the United States, back into Gaza, more aggressive toward Iran. And it was Trump that had to get into the peace talks, not the peace talks, the nuclear talks with Iran. But you have Israel begging, demanding strikes. But of course, with Yemen, with Iran, with Gaza, and the entire region, you do have this situation where there are many people who believe Israel is the one who is kind of dictating all of this. Colonel Wilkerson, what do you have to say to this? Because you've been very vocal about war games against Iran and about why the U.S. is actually continuing, even under Trump, who promised peace, even a ceasefire in Gaza before he came in. So what do you make of the purpose of all of the explosion of warfare that's gone on there? And of course, these Iran talks, which there's optimism, but also there's Michael Anton and neocons also chomping at the bits to potentially sabotage them.
I think that's one of the reasons that there's so much turmoil around Pete Hegseth right now, the Secretary of Defense, because there are so many different people who want him gone. But one of the most powerful elements, composed of both uniformed military and civilians, and particularly I would put probably Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, in this category, maybe even Marco Rubio, who don't like the fact that Hegseth has sided with Trump, apparently, with regard to a war with Iran, and therefore not sided with Bibi Netanyahu and not sided with them who want a war. And this goes all the way to the Central Command, Unified Command Commander, too, who wants the war. He, after all, met with the Israeli Defense Force and I'm told, with Netanyahu, too. And they did some extensive planning on a combined strike against Iran, combined Israel and the U.S. He's only got a few months, I think, left in the job, and he wants a war before he's gone so he can write his book, My American Journey, and make lots of money. I mean, I could only assume that, but this is the way these people think these days. So that's mitigating, not mitigating, but militating against Witkoff and Trump, who I think genuinely, and Trump has empowered Witkoff. We've seen this because Waltz came out between the first meeting in Muscat and the second meeting and said Witkoff essentially denied that Witkoff had been right, that Iran had to completely disarm in one of the most dangerous regions of the world, if you will. And that was not what Witkoff had told the Iranians, as little conversation as he had directly with them in Muscat. And therefore he was wrong. Well, Trump apparently backed Witkoff, and Witkoff went back and said the same thing again in Muscat, and even made more impression on his interlocutors from Iran. And now we're moving down that path. So it looks to me like Trump is backing Witkoff, but lots of other people in the government don't like what he's doing. Hegseth has had a problem because he's more or less going along with that, at least in the public domain, he's going along with it. don't know how he feels privately, but he's going along with it in terms of the president, which the Secretary of Defense should be doing. I mean, after all, they're the two people who command the military. So I think we've got a possible chance here that Trump might be, not lying on this one, that he really is empowering Witkoff to effect a deal, which will be principally a deal of verification, just like the JCPOA was. And as people have said, I think Larry said this when my internet went out, the Russians will do as the Russians had said they would do before. They will take the uranium that's enriched above 3.7% or whatever it is. And if Iran needs some for medical purposes or whatever, they'll give it to them. But this is workable. This is with the IAEA helping. It's workable. And I think Trump wants this and not a war. But this is going to be a huge bone of contention within his administration, as we're seeing now.
If there is a war, it's just be absolutely catastrophic. But Larry, please jump in.
Well, we can't rule out Iran trying, something in desperation to attack Iran. But the attack.
Sorry, did you mean Israel?
Yeah, I mean Israel to attack Iran. That it will end badly for Israel. I am troubled by assumptions that people in the Trump administration are making, that people in Israel are making. And the number one assumption is that they destroyed Iran's air defense system and inflicted serious damage on Iran on that October 27th raid. They did not. Yeah. And yet that's what they're telling themselves. That they did. Oh, yeah, we did. Since then, Iran has now deployed an over the 2,300 kilometer over the horizon radar, which means they can see everything into Israel now. So there's no chance of a surprise attack or a stealth attack, and that also sweeps down towards in the direction of Diego Garcia. So Iran is much stronger, better positioned, both militarily and diplomatically, because the agreement with Russia went into effect on January 17th. And, I think Russia determined the timing of the signing 3 days before Donald Trump took the oath of office as a deliberate sign. We're here, we're backing them, they're part of us. Now, as Colonel Wilkerson correctly noted, this is a deal just waiting. This is low-hanging fruit. This is an easy deal. Iran will happily agree to 3.6%, keeping its peaceful nuclear energy program going in exchange for lifting the economic sanctions. No problem. They'll do that. And they'll allow inspections. Let the IAEA put whatever group of inspectors you want, come in, look. We're going to show you that you can be confident of that. Well, if Trump doesn't take that deal, then the man is a certifiable moron. Because if he succumbs to the Zionist objections, and Bibi Netanyahu's going to scream and howl, all of the Zionist crazies will be enraged. You've got elements within the U.S. government that will want to try to bomb, join Israel in an attack, or even encourage Israel do the attack. And once Iran's responding, then we'll join in with you. But if Trump takes this, and this is now the fourth week of talks. It started 3 weeks ago, and I was always saying, I was always waiting and watching. If they come out of that meeting, questioning each other's mother's sexuality, then we got problems. But that didn't happen. Each time they came out and reported productive talks. And then even as when Witkoff did his, volte-face, first said, oh, yeah, just enrichment. Then, no, missiles and all this other stuff. I thought, well, that's going to blow it up. But I guess he went back into the talks, and that didn't come up again.
Yep.
So the key player in this that I don't think has gotten a lot of attention is Russia. because Russia with Witkoff is giving them assurance. So we can guarantee Donald Trump that they will never build a nuke. We'll make sure of it, and we'll help you get the inspections. Trump needs to win because he's getting his ass kicked on tariffs in China. The Houthis are whooping up on him in the Red Sea, and Russia's crushing it in Ukraine. So, man, he gets this. He can say, hey, my first 100 days, I got a nuclear deal with Iran. That'd be the smart thing to do. I can't tell you with any certainty that he would want to be that smart.
The other thing we forget, Larry doesn't know, but Russia was a part of the Perm 5+1 in the JCPOA.
Right.
And they were as concerned at that time about Iran as anybody else in the group. And that concern hasn't gone away, even with a security agreement and everything else. And they would be willing, I think, as Larry said, to be sort of an overseer from that perspective. Maybe a little more friendly overseer now, but nonetheless, an overseer, and to make sure that things are copacetic there.
Yeah, and I think a big theme of all of this has been Russia and China too coming together with Iran to prevent the war. They don't want to see an escalation or proliferation of war, and they've actually been, from my view, I see them operating almost first and foremost as the leaders of this, and then the United States coming in, even though it looks on the surface that Trump's bluster, war threats, all of that are what is driving all of this. But it seems to be that this process, Iran is with Russia and China, and then they're going, and the process is then being mediated.